V'achta l'racha kamocha. Love thy neighbor as you love thyself. This comes from the book of Leviticus in the Hebrew Bible and in the Gospels, which record Jesus' life in the New Testament. We're coming again to the tools to study religion, and sometimes it's good to be reminded of the great sayings about or from religious traditions. Love your neighbor as yourself is part of the Jewish and Christian heritage, and we'll see that it comes back in a slightly different form in Islam a little bit later in the course. This is the second part of week 2, the tools to study religion, especially as we focus in this course, RELS 100, on Western religions and monotheistic religions of encounter or confrontation. Last time we looked at anthropological and philosophical approaches to religion. Now I want to look at psychological theories about religion. Interesting, the Greek word that is the basis of psychology is the word psyche, which is often translated soul. And when psychology was being developed in the 19th century, in many ways it was promoted as a solution to understanding the soul, a solution that wasn't religious in a certain sense. And then psychology began very quickly, especially following Sigmund Freud, to study religion. And a psychological approach to religion studies religion as it relates to the mind and the functions of the mind, especially those affecting behavior in a given context. This approach often sees religion as an experience of individuals, sometimes or often rooted in unconscious life, mystical experiences, or neurosis, sometimes in great archetypes and theories and stories. Questions asked by psychologists are these, or questions like these. What's going on when people report religious experiences? I just heard God speak. What's going on in the person's thinking or psyche? What are the unconscious roots of religious ideas and symbols? A little bit later in the course, we're going to look at Sigmund Freud, who I mentioned a bit earlier today, but in this installment, this lecture. But I want to look now at Carl Jung, whose dates are 1875 to 1961. Jung had many, many ideas. This Swiss psychologist, some ways, is an antithesis to Freud's thought. His big idea, though, that is in addition to the individual unconscious, there is a collective unconscious that includes archetypes. So swirling about in everybody, in every individual, there's things that aren't in our conscious mind that's directly, accessible, but there are unconscious elements and archetypes. There's the father, the mother, and the hero. And religious myths and symbols are traceable to these archetypes. So one of Jung's archetypes are the hero myth, which starts with a hero of uncertain origins. So in Jungian approaches to the story of Jesus, Jesus is born of a virgin. You don't know who his father is. And even you really don't know much in the stories from the Bible about his early life. You see the 3 wise men or magi coming. You see the shepherds. But after that, there's kind of a mystery about him. If you know Star Wars, Jung influenced the story of Star Wars, and Luke Skywalker is also of uncertain origins, who ultimately becomes the hero in the story and quests as a hero in the story. So that's one form of psychological approaches, looking at what is going on in the mind or the minds of people. Final one I want to emphasize in terms of approaches to religion is sociological theories about religion. Sociology is a study of groups, study of human society at a given period in time. Sociology focuses on social relationships. And thus, a sociological approach studies religion as a part of the development, structure, and functioning of human society. And here it overlaps with anthropological theories, which see religion as a function also of groups in certain ways. But as human groups, sociology really focuses on groups. That's the unit of measure. The questions it asks are, what is the relation between religion and other social systems? How do religious groups form and grow or decay or whatever? How does the group, how do you understand the group? And how are power and authority managed in religious groups? One of the famous sociologists of religion is Émile Durkheim, the French sociologist whose dates are 1858 to 1917. And he spoke about collective effervescence. Durkheim commented on the intense ceremonial experiences where individuals enter into a sacred time. They lose themselves into the collective identity by merging joyfully in the common self of the clan. So on the slides, there's a picture of the soccer match with the fans going crazy. I also have a picture of an MTV award show with Beyonce and her daughter Blue Ivy. Is it Blue Ivy? Blue, yeah. A few years back, but I remember seeing Beyonce in concert, and at one point, this was at AT&T Park in San Francisco, and her image on the screen was probably like 60 feet tall, and there was, in my mind, as a student, a scholar of religion, there was that religious devotion that was being paid to her. All eyes were focused on her. There was a collective experience of hearing her and Jay-Z sing and rap and so on. So here's how at least Durkheim put it. I'm saying this, by the way, just about Beyonce and concerts and so on, and sporting events, because there is a kind of religious experience. And here's Durkheim, quote, "In the midst of these effervescent social environments and out of this effervescence itself, the religious idea seems to be born." Another major theorist, Robert Bellah, who lived from 1927 to 2013 and taught for many years at Berkeley. When I was a student, he was a sociologist there, leading in the sociology of religion. Also followed Durkheim in his thinking quite a bit. He has this idea of American civil religion. And here it is. Religion is based on rituals. National rituals and mythology create an American civil religion that reinforces national values and motivations. It exists alongside traditional religions. So when you see the inauguration of a president, you see often religious symbols. God bless America. God bless our troops. This idea that God is part, and it's hard to know, exactly what this God refers to. Is it the God of Judaism, of Islam? Is it the God of other traditions, is Christianity? But this God reinforces the civil society that we have, and this kind of American civil religion gets reinterpreted. But it's always the connection of the civilization, particularly the politics, with a religious sort of language and rituals. Finally, and this is a person I want to spend the most time on for the final part here, is Victor Turner. Lived from 1920 to 1933. This is another cultural anthropologist. So we're looking at anthropological approaches now. Moving back to that, he expanded theories of liminality and communitas, where the quote, "the community of equals submit together to the general authority of the elders." This approach is critical to upholding legal, political, and social structures. And in it, oddly enough, as far as holding up structure, Turner had this liminal state, which represents the dynamic between structure, systems of hierarchy, bureaucracy, order, power, and control, and anti-structure, freedom, creativity, lawlessness, chaos, that every society must manage. Okay, so I'm going to give you some examples in a minute, but stick with theory. If you see this slide, there's an old status, there's rights of separation, there's a liminal status, and then a reincorporation into a new status. So let's look at each of those. So this is religious, and there's rights of separation. So there's often actual physical separation from the community and/or symbolic stripping away of an old identity. In the picture of the slides, the Buddhist monk is undergoing ritual head shaving during an initiation ceremony. In the Native American religion, here in Chico, we live in the world of the Maidu, where the Maidu had rituals of separation, and often in Native American ceremonies, there's a separation for the sake of moving into adulthood, moving away, if you're a man, with other males in the tribe, to then be brought back in, having become a man and moving from being a boy. Yeah, thinking about what that means in the context of American Indian practices. The second is the liminal stage. Limen in Latin is a boundary or border. You see this picture of kissing under the mistletoe. Mistletoe allows us to be on the border. We walk into a party, and when there's mistletoe, if there's no COVID, you can have the breaking of a boundary, and so it's a sort of state of in-betweenness. The old identity is gone, a new identity is not fully established. And at this point, there's an isolation and a learning. Back to Star Wars, if you remember when Luke goes into the cave under Yoda's teaching, and there's a kind of liminal breaking away. He gets down deep into his subconscious and fights Darth Vader, even though he's told not to fight. And finally, in the third stage after the rite of separation, the liminal stage, there's a new status. Here you see Catholic confirmation and sorority initiation. It could be fraternity initiation. So if you know the experience that was traditionally part of fraternities of Hell Week, you'd go and you'd be stripped away. You'd have to do menial chores. Sometimes you'd be left by yourself, stranded with a dime or a dollar to somehow, I don't know, get your way into a ride back to where you're supposed to be. And then you come back and you're part of, through a process of initiation and rites, to be a full member of the fraternity. Here, the sorority, women are all in white, signifying their initiation as new members. They're full members after the time of initiation. In the Catholic Church, previously you couldn't communicate, meaning you couldn't have communion, and then you become a full communicant after confirmation. And here, the bishop is blessing these young kids to be full members of the Catholic Church. So some final tools for approaching religion. Particularly, we looked a little bit at cultural anthropology of Victor Turner, sociological tools from Durkheim, Bella, and Jung, and before that, psychological tools. That was Jung with psychological tools. All ways of helping us to see, how do we understand this universal, global practice in humanity of religion.